Welcome back to another segment of The Truth from the Booth. I originally had a podcast named that. It didn't really work out that well, so I thought, you know what? I'm going to steal that. I'm going to recall it to this segment where I have none other than the voice of the Wildcats, the very truth from our own booth, Wyatt Thompson. Wyatt, it's always great to have you on the show.
Well, it's good to be with you again, buddy. I appreciate it, and looking forward to talking K-State each week.
Oh, man, me too. Me too. So Kansas State, Missouri this week. We're renewing the hate from the Big Eight times. And now Kansas State put a beating on Missouri last year, 40-12. I'm surprised at how chippy it's starting to get. There's some chippiness that I was reading from an article and some quotes from some K-State players by Kellis Robinette. I was reading some stuff from Missouri this week. Everybody seems to be pretty fired up about this game. How are you feeling about it?
Well, I think if you're not fired up about it, there's probably something wrong with you. These two teams have been playing, albeit sparingly, over the last decade plus. This will be the 99th meeting, so there's some history there. I mentioned in an interview earlier today about, going all the way back to the Jack Hartman days with Norm Stewart, the coach of Mizzou. The old saying is that Norm wouldn't drive over here on a Friday and stay the night because he wasn't spending any of his darn money in the state of Kansas. Hey, it is what it is. But I think at the end of the day, it is about history with these two. And, the reality of it is it's been one rivalry that I miss. I appreciated it a lot, both football and men's basketball, because we had some wars with those guys, and it's kind of what it is.
One of my favorite calls of yours of all time is when Archer picked off the ball to return it for a touchdown in the end of the Snyder 1.0 era. And I was watching that this week to get fired up. So it's exciting. And there is a lot of history there between Kansas State and Missouri, probably more than Kansas State and Kansas fans would like to admit, but there really is. So for me, my initial impressions of this particular game, just because of the way that both teams have been playing, I think this is going to come down to who controls the line of scrimmage. It's our veteran offensive line against their vaulted defensive line. What's your impression of that for this weekend's game?
I think you're on task there, to be honest with you, because I think if you crunch numbers, and yes, it's a small sample size with two games, but the one thing that's constant between the two in two games is really good defense. Okay, Missouri's done it. Kansas State's done it. Mizzou's defense is pretty good. I think you have to respect that. Really, the difference between the two teams in the first 2 weeks, and it is hard to compare because it's different opponents, is that K-State has probably been a little bit more consistent on the offensive side. Doesn't mean to say that Missouri can't, on a given day, do some good things, because when you have Brady Cook and Luther Burden and some guys like that, Theo Weiss, Mookie Cooper, it's not that they're talent void. It's just that K-State's been a little bit more consistent. But I think you're on it. Easily, this game comes down to not only the line of scrimmage and who wins both sides, but probably mistakes in special teams too. Usually when two teams that don't care for each other very much get together, that's usually part of it too.
Definitely. And we saw special teams make an impact last year when Phillip Brooks returns that punt directly out of the rain delay. And it just seemed to break the back of Missouri right then and there. And then Kansas State went on and blew them out for the rest of the game.
Well, and Phil's done that a lot of times, hasn't he? He had a terrific game last week. I'm so thrilled that he's back for a sixth year. He's played in 55 games. That's enough that we think that's a K-State record, although that's a stat much like RBIs years ago in baseball. It wasn't kept until later years.
Wow.
But let's say it isn't a record. I think it is, but let's say it isn't. By the time this season is over, if he stays healthy, he's going to have the record because he's going to be in excess of 60 games played, and I love that. He's I think the perfect example of what we're describing in this rivalry. He's basically from Missouri and wanted to be recruited by them, and they didn't recruit him. He comes to K-State. I think he likes beating them. I know he did last year. I'll bet he will if we do it again.
Yeah, I definitely, if the tables were turned and I happened to be on the team, I think I would feel a little bit of chippiness that way. That, sure. You disrespected me. I wanted to go to your school. You didn't recruit me. And now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to beat you. So how about that?
Hi, My name is Ryan Gilbert. I'm a former sports broadcaster for Wildcat 91.9, K-State alum, and basketball recruiting editor for GoPowerCat.com. The last academic year was a historic one for the station, as Wildcat 91.9 was named the best college radio station in the nation by the Intercollegiate Broadcasting System Awards, the first national championship in program history. However, despite all the awards and success, the budget for Wildcat 91.9 continues to be cut year by year. I'll be perfectly frank with you. Either Wildcat 91.9 finds new funding through charitable giving, or it will permanently go off the air. That's why I'm asking you today to consider making a tax-deductible contribution to the station so that the longest continuously running college FM radio station in the nation can continue to train the next generation of media stars. To make a contribution or discuss options for creating an endowment fund, please reach out to us at www.wildcat919.com/donate. That's www.wildcat919.com/donate. Thanks so much. Go Cats, and always remember that at Wildcat 919, you belong.
Speaking of getting beaten in the defensive game, let's talk a little bit, because I don't think he was beaten per se, but I think that Troy just did some really great stuff to limit Ben Sinnott. They double teamed him a lot. They bracketed him a lot on defense. What's Missouri going to have to do to stop him, especially now that they have Keegan Johnson, who looks like he's going to be taking more reps?
Well, that makes it harder, doesn't it? I think that's part of the answer. Excuse me. And I also would say, and you were there Tuesday at the press conference, and you heard Ben Sinnott say, hey, I'm okay. If they're taking me away, somebody else is going to be open. And we've got enough somebody else's. And I'm paraphrasing quite a bit there, but that's basically in essence what he said. We've got enough guys to hurt you. And I was really impressed on a limited basis in seeing Keegan Johnson in live action for the first time other than in practice. I think he's absolutely one of the top receivers K-State has. So try to bracket and take Ben away if you can, because I think it leaves a lot of other things open. I don't know that everybody will be able to do that as well as Troy did it. Sure, there'll be some, but Ben's probably a pro. He's going to find his way, and find some creases too. I think personally.
Sure. And we have to rely on his athleticism, right? Because he has to get out and just make some plays. When you have a dude like Ben Sinnott, I think that's why Will Howard's been kind of throwing into coverage recently. We've seen him make a couple of intriguing decisions where he's going to throw it into double, triple coverage just because of the relationship it seems that he has with Ben Sinnott, and he trusts his hands. Can we talk a little bit about how Will Howard has thrown in 2 interceptions in both games? One of them you could say wasn't his fault because he was hit as he was throwing it, but the other one just kind of sailed on him. How are we feeling about Will Howard and his decision-making at the moment?
Well, to be honest, other than the 2 throws that you're talking about, the one against Semo and the one against Troy, I think he's been about what the coaches thought he would be, Kolby, if I'm being honest. I mean, you think about last week, he was responsible for 5 touchdowns. That is a little bit of a rarity in K-State football history. Yes, it's happened, but it doesn't happen a ton. I think he's playing with a great deal of confidence. I think the best thing about him, honestly, and there are a lot of quality check marks there when you start checking everything off that he's good at, but he's to the point now in understanding not only K-State's offense, but what he is seeing when he looks down the line of scrimmage and out at that defense of kind of what they're trying to do. And he can adjust to that on the move. Now, you're going to get fooled every now and again. Dan Marino got fooled. So did John Elway. So does Patrick Mahomes once in a while. You get the point. But I love what he sees. He can check to the right play. I think what we're describing here with Will is, and I think Colin Klein has talked to him about that, it's okay to be aggressive, but don't be over the top with it. And I think the throw last weekend against Troy, he just tried to do too much. Be who you are, because who you are is clearly good enough.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And if anybody's saying that it's not good enough, then they've got their head in the sand, because I mean, as of right now, he's 39 of 58, 2 picks, 547 yards, 5 passing touchdowns, a collection of rushing touchdowns. He has an efficiency rating of 168.0. I mean, it doesn't get a whole lot better than that. There's a video on YouTube of Colin Klein when he was in 2012 destroying West Virginia in Morgantown. It said the day that Colin Klein should have won the Heisman. And he was responsible for 7 touchdowns. He threw 4, he rushed for 3. Will Howard threw 3 and rushed for 2 against Troy this last weekend. Now, Was it number 11 West Virginia? No, but still, he's 2 away from having 7 touchdowns on the game, which is just absurd. So I'm excited to see how he handles this Missouri defense. What's your impression of just the way Missouri plays defense in general?
Well, before I answer that, let's go back and read that number again with the quarterback rating, because I want to make a point here. 160 point something, right?
168 flat.
Well, a year ago, when everybody raved about how good Will Howard was in the final weeks of the season, the final 5, his rating was 159.4 then. It's 168 now. So I think we're making the point that the dude can play. Okay.
Yeah.
My impressions of the Missouri defense is probably about what you would think. Really, really solid on the defensive front. And like K-State, I think that's where it starts. But like K-State, they've got a couple of people at all levels that are, pretty rock solid. Tyron Hopper, one of their linebackers, is a really good player. You get into that secondary, and Ennis Rakestraw played a lot of football. The Drain kid has played a lot of football. Their safeties are solid. It's just a really quality coordinated defense. I don't know that they're dominant, but I do think they will create some problems for K-State, and I think K-State will have to open up the playbook a little bit more than what we've seen in the first 2 weeks. And frankly, I think Mizzou will have to too. Both have probably not shown as much as they are capable of in the first 2 weeks, and that's what this game is all about, right? I mean, getting away from tendencies and yet still playing to your strength.
So Eli Drinkwitz, you mentioned Colin Klein and with Will Howard. Eli Drinkwitz, and I don't know how much you pay attention to this, but in his press conference, seemingly had no idea who Colin Klein was as the offensive coordinator for K-State. He said, I think they call him CK. Oh, yeah. He's the guy that dropped 40 on you last year and you don't remember him? Okay, sounds good. What was your impression of that? Are you allowed to have an impression of that, or are you allowed to share your impression of that?
I probably, if I'm being honest, I probably didn't take it as the insult that some did.
Sure.
I don't know that he meant anything bad by it, and I'm not trying to defend him either. I'm just being honest. Let me just cut to the chase here. I don't make a ton of promises, and I've probably even said that to you before, but I can promise you he knows who Colin Klein is. Trust me, he knows. And if he doesn't, I would be the most stunned guy in the world. Colin is a very talented individual, and he's done a terrific job as a play caller. I think he's only getting better as he goes. You see the production of the K-State offense. Trust me, he knows who CK or Colin Klein is. I'm convinced of it.
Okay. Well, as we wrap up this segment of the show, and I so appreciate your time this week, how much of the playbook do you think we're going to see from Colin Klein against Missouri? You've moved from FCS to Group of 5 to now your Power 5. This is the best defense K-State is going to see in some time. And the offense looked kind of vanilla, not going to lie, against FCS, SEMO, and then against Troy. How much do you think Colin Klein opens it up against Missouri?
Well, I don't know that they'll show the whole boat, if that makes sense. But they're going to do what they have to do to win the game. And it's as simple as that. Let's go back to what we talked about with the line of scrimmage. I don't know that one team is going to be dominant over the other in this one, because I think K-State is the better team, if I'm being honest. I think they're the more consistent team. I think they are a very well-coached team. Those are all probably pretty big advantages. And yet Missouri is good enough defensively that you may have to show a little bit more here just to get in and out of there with a win and then move on to next week against UCF, if that makes sense. I think with all of the weapons that they have, again, I don't, how much of the playbook will be available. I'm probably not smart enough to really answer that. But I do think they're going to have to do a little bit more than we've seen in the first couple of weeks. I know, here's one thing I will say. I know there's a lot more in that playbook of Colin Klein's, because all you have to do is ask the players about that. They know.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, Wyatt, I so appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to, since I'm certainly not buying the SEC network, it's going to be you and Stan. I'm going to have Wyatt vision going for me while listening on Saturdays. So appreciate your time as always, my friend.
Well, I'll do the best for you that I can, man. I appreciate the time, and let's do it again next week.
Absolutely. We will see you next week.